So this brings us to our sort of last piece of the puzzle here, where we're going to talk about method stubs and mock objects, which are sort of the two basic kinds of seams. And we've sort of already been working with them. Again, just to recap where we are so far, here's what our controller action looks like today. It makes sure that the search field is permitted in params, and then it just passes the contents of that field to movie find in TMDB. We wrote that code because we had a test that very specifically said, does the controller action call the correct model method and pass the right thing to it? And yes, it does, but right now we're not like expecting a return value or anything, which is kind of weird. So if we now look at the last of those three specs, it says it makes the search results available to the template. Okay, so obviously at this point, we would have to care about the return value because right now there's no information that's available to pass to the template. And this is where we now finally have to deal with this question of the real movie find in TMDB method, when we someday get around to writing it, would actually return something. And so far, our tests have been written not really caring about that fact and sort of glossing over. So again, going back to the code we wish we had concept, what do we wish it would return? And from a design point of view, like I said, I think it would be a nice simple thing to say, it returns an enumerable of movie objects, of active record movie instances. And if there's no matches, it'll still return an enumerable, but the enumerable would be empty. I mean, that's a pretty reasonable design decision. So again, the important thing to keep in mind here is that what we are testing is the controller gets some return value from find in TMDB, and it makes that value available to the view. We're not testing find in TMDB. So if find in TMDB returned a fish, what we're checking is that the controller passes a fish to the view. Obviously, there are no fish in Ruby, but you get the idea, right? Yes, we can make up whatever we would like that function to return, but for the purpose of this test, all that it matters is that it returns something, and that same something gets made available to the view. It is not our job to verify that the kind of thing returned makes any sense. We're only concerned about whether it gets correctly moved from point A to point B, right? Because controller methods are simple. That's all they do. So to say that a result is going to be made available to a view, what does that mean in Rails? Well, the way you pass information from a controller to a view is you set an instance variable in the controller action, and then the view can dereference that instance variable. So here's another useful thing that we get from the RSpec Rails library, assigns, which is a hash of all the instance variables that got set by the controller during that controller action. So that means that when we're doing our assertion on it passes information to the view, really it says we're going to write something like this. We're going to say expect assigns of movie. So we're going to be looking for an instance variable movie to equal some value. The question is, what value? Because now, if we were to modify the controller method to look like that, it would probably end up looking something like this, right? That instead of just calling find in TMDB, we're now assigning the result of the call to @movie, and that will expect assigns movie to equal something. But now we're assuming that movie find in TMDB has to return a thing, right? And up till now, we've finessed it. It's returning nil, not good. This is where doubles come into play. A double is basically like a stunt double in a movie. All it knows how to do is the one thing that's necessary for that test. So if I create this object by calling double, which is an RSpec construction, I will get back an object. And remember, and this is why this is easier to do in Ruby than it is in some other imperative languages. Remember that the way that Ruby's class system works, the only access to attributes, instance variables of an object, is via methods, right? You have to call a getter method or call a setter method even to inspect attributes. So basically, trying to mock an attribute in Ruby is basically just stubbing a method call. This movie object, M, the double, it doesn't know how to do anything. There's no method that it responds to, but we can make it a little bit smarter by stubbing some methods. For example, if we create this movie double and then we say, allow, so if someone calls the method title on M, then it should return Snowden. It's an absolutely canned behavior. Because this kind of shortcut is so common, there is a shorthand for doing it in RSpec, which is something like this, right? Basically, it says, please create me an object, just give it this label movie so that when I see my test output, I know what it's supposed to represent. Allow it to respond to a title method and return this. And by the way, there are other more sophisticated versions of this. Like you can say, create this double, and the first time someone calls it, it should return this. But the second time, it should return this, and the third time, it should return this, and so forth. So there's a lot of facilities, but basically what you're creating is a little stunt double that isn't a real movie, but it's going to stand in for one of your tests. So the minimum number of behaviors that basically allow it to fulfill the role that is required in a test. And a very classic case is just like the one we have here, where you're passing it to another method, and you know that that method expects it to respond to some specific methods. So if we put all these things together, this is kind of what our new test ends up looking like. For this very specific example of making search results available, I will create a fake result object, which I wish find in TMDB would return. So I create it by, I'm just going to create 2 stunt doubles. They don't need to have any behavior because I'm not using them in any test scenario where they're expected to do something. And we'll show examples in a little while of cases where you need to create a double that actually has some behaviors because the test does expect it to do a little something. But in this case, all it needs to be is like a warm body standing in for a value, right? So we'll create these fake results, an enumerable of these 2 things. And now when we modify our call to say, we'll allow the movie class to receive find in TMDB and return the fake results if so, right? Notice the use of allow versus expect here. Expect means it is an error if it doesn't get called. Allow means maybe it'll get called, maybe not. If it does, here is what to do. Why the difference? Because in this specific test case, the only thing the test cares about is whether the value is going to be communicated to the search results or not. This specific test does not care that find in TMDB is called because that's the job of some other test that already happened, right? So again, I'm making this sort of exaggeratedly simple, but I'm really trying to illustrate the point that each test is about one thing, and everything that is not about that one thing needs to be pushed out of the way so that if the test fails, you know that's the reason it fails, right? That is the essence of thinking about TDD is what is the one behavior I care about and what's all the other stuff that I have to sort of set up and push out of the way to the perimeter so that it does not interfere with me triggering that behavior and expecting the results. So if we do that, we can now expect the assigns hash to have an object in it called movies. And furthermore, we should expect that the value of that object is this fake results thing we created. This fake results thing could have been anything, by the way. It could have been a string. It could have been a fish, right? To use my earlier non-funny joke. All that we really care about is that the controller got a value from over here, and it makes sure that that same value is being made available to the view. So for form's sake, I use doubles here, but the truth is, for this very simple example, I could have made the value anything I want. I could have made it a constant as long as it fulfills the test functionality of get the value from here to there. But like I said, we're going to see a few more cases coming up where the use of doubles is actually much more important. And the fact that they can have limited abilities actually contributes to what they do when you put them in a test case.